Hello, welcome back to the original lockdown library for tonight's Salon de la Vie. We're back into the beautiful gold screen in my little lockdown library in my own little living room, and you've got all the beautiful cherry blossom on the screen behind me and the colourful birds. So it feels very like how it is on the streets of London, where I'm currently sort of seeing all the cherry blossom coming out and hearing all the birds, because we're back in that springtime again where we found ourselves about this time last year, suddenly locked down. Let's not overthink it. We're not quite back to the beginning. People are having vaccines. I've even had a vaccine. My years of lifelong asthma playing off there. But yeah, it makes it even more exciting that I'm going to be talking to you tonight about someone that I'm really, really passionate about. And it's another famous, iconic blonde, same as where we started with Mae West all of a year ago. I am wearing the trademark. It is in fact the same ingredients apparently in this lipstick that Marilyn used to wear. It's called Red Hot Red. And I am of course drinking, and I hope you're drinking with me, her favourite tipple, which is a glass of champers. I'm going to show you the bottle because it's a bit of a cheat. It may not literally actually be champers, because it turns out Marilyn Monroe is quite a lot more famous and successful than me. But I do tend to drink it as much as I can, which is what she did, so I'm going to say it counts. That's very good actually, whatever that is. Fizzy dry something. Running wild, lost control, running wild, mighty bold, feeling gay, reckless too, carefree mind all the time, never blue, always going, don't know where, always showing I don't care, don't love nobody, it's not worthwhile, all alone, running wild. So, I think if you were watching last week, which was our Mother's Day special, you'd have heard me talk about my love of old films, and in fact being homeschooled and just be able to watch old films all the time. And that, of course, is where I first came across Marilyn Monroe. And I just used to, I had an obsession with certain films, and I would just watch them literally on loop, back to back to back to back to back. And Marilyn's were really often those films. So 7 Year Itch, Some Like It Hot. I just thought they were the most wonderful things. And I couldn't work her out. She was clearly so compelling, so beautiful. And but it was a kind of confusing love for her at the same time, because you felt like you could never be as beautiful as her, but you also, it didn't put you off watching her, which quite often that's not always straightforward with women. You're comparing yourself and things, but it didn't seem to quite go to that place with Marilyn. She was so beyond what you can imagine being like. There was something almost not human or superhuman or different about her. But then at the same time as you could be really envious of that, you also felt in some weird way like maybe that you were luckier than her. Maybe actually it wasn't possible to be as sad as her either. A very strange dichotomy. And that seems to come out as I got older. I was reading lots of biogs about her, and people seem to share this kind of slightly confused set of feelings about Marilyn Monroe. So men write about her really weirdly. Like there's her, both obviously Norman Mailer, who famously wrote her autobiography with her, although he wrote about her a lot, and it's all very through his own lens of just fancying her, and very dismissive of her own claims about her own identity and experiences. And then there's Goddess by Anthony Summers, which just is outrightly sort of hostile to her, really, really aggressive in places. And again, totally not. No men seem to believe that she's been abused, which is what she says happened to her when she was young. Which I always felt like looking at her. Well, yeah, that feels like you have definitely got daddy issues, and there's lots of stuff that's gone on for you that I think probably, for me, it felt like a very ready thing to believe. And for these guys, they're like, oh, but of course that wouldn't have happened. I guess maybe because they also wanted to sleep with her and that made them feel uncomfortable. Who knows? Anyway, not going to make excuses for them. It's just a dick move, isn't it, not to believe the survivor. So even very empathic and friendly men like Truman Capote, who writes about her in his brilliant little sort of scripted account called A Beautiful Child, is still writing about her as a beautiful child, not an adult human friend. But it is a really lovely account. So I'm going to read you an extract of it for our first reading. I don't know if you've come across these. his portraits and observations, but they're absolutely fantastic little vignettes about people in his life and him spending a day with them. And the one about Marilyn Monroe and the one about his cleaner as well. Those are my two favourites, so give them a look. But anyway, in this one, he's going to a funeral with Marilyn of a very beloved performer turned drama teacher that they both knew called Miss Collier. And they've met at the chapel. Marilyn starts the dialogue. "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. But see, I got all made up and then I decided maybe I shouldn't wear eyelashes or lipstick or anything. So then I had to wash that off and I couldn't imagine what to wear." What she had imagined to wear would have been appropriate for the abbess of a nunnery in a private audience with the Pope. Her hair was entirely concealed by a black chiffon scarf. Her black dress was loose and long and looked somehow borrowed. Black silk stockings dulled the blonde sheen of her slender legs. An abbess, one could be certain, would not have donned the vaguely erotic black high-heeled shoes she had chosen, or the owlish black sunglasses that dramatised the vanilla pallor of her dairy-fresh skin. "You look fine." Marilyn, gnawing an already chewed to the nub thumbnail. "Are you sure? I mean, I'm so jumpy. Where's the John? I could just pop in there for a minute." "And pop a pill? No, shh. There's Cyril Richards' voice. He started the eulogy." Tiptoeing, we entered the crowded chapel and wedged ourselves into a narrow space in the last row. Cyril finished and was followed by another lifelong colleague of Miss Collier's, and finally there was an address by for her mourners. Through it all, my date periodically removed her spectacles to scoop up tears bubbling from her blue-grey eyes. I'd sometimes seen her without makeup, but today she presented a new visual experience, a face I'd not observed before, and at first I couldn't perceive why this should be. It was because of the obscuring headscarf, with her tresses visible, her complexion cleared of all cosmetics. She looked 12 years old, a pubescent virgin who's just been admitted to an orphanage and is grieving over her plight. At last the ceremony ended and the congregation began to disperse. "Please, let's sit here. Let's wait till everybody's left." "Why?" "I don't want to talk to anybody. I never know what to say." "Then you sit here and I'll wait outside. I've got to smoke a cigarette." "You can't leave me alone. My God, smoke here." "Here? In the chapel?" "Why not? What do you want to smoke? A reefer?" "Very funny. Come on, let's go." "Oh, please. There are lots of shuttlebugs downstairs, and I certainly don't want them taking my picture looking like this." "I can't blame you for that." "You said I looked fine." "You do, just perfect. If you were playing the Bride of Frankenstein." "Now you are laughing at me." "Do I look like I'm laughing?" "You are laughing inside, and that's the worst kind of laugh." "Actually, I could have worn makeup. I see all the other people are wearing makeup." "I am globs." "Seriously, though." "It's my hair. I need colour. I didn't have time to get it. It was all so unexpected, Mrs. Collier dying and all. See?" She lifted her kerchief slightly to display a fringe of darkness where her hair parted. "Poor innocent me. And all this time I thought you were bona fide blonde." "I am. But nobody is that natural. And incidentally, fuck you." And then, of course, there's how she's written about by feminists. I started to look at that as I was growing up and watching these films over and over and then reading guys I'm pretty sure were getting her wrong. And there's some very interesting deconstructions of her through a feminist lens, of course, for reasons that I felt were obvious. Well, I'll read you one of the ones that really struck me when I first read it. Again, a book you must go back to if you haven't read it, or go back to it if you haven't read it for a while. It's a reading from Joan Smith's Misogynies. Here's her radical feminist take on Marilyn Monroe as an icon. "What is Marilyn other than a woman made for sex? Yet not even a woman. The simple, naive mind of a child has been transplanted into the body of a full-grown woman. Sex with her would be like eating ice cream," Norman Mailer wrote. He was wrong. More like taking sweets from a child in the park. The source of Marilyn's appeal for Mailer is her absolute passivity. She is defenceless as a child, a woman to whom a man can do anything in the name of sex, secure in the knowledge that she'll never complain. She won't demand any degree of reciprocity. The contradiction of her achievement for Marilyn is now all too plain. Her hard work, her sacrifices, the discarded husbands and lovers, the miscarriages and abortions, have arrived at this. She is valued only for her lack of value. Her power is weakest when her success is complete. Of course she is unhappy. In a perverse way, Marilyn's death was the next step in her career as a sex symbol. By dying, she removed at a stroke the possibility of other, older images replacing those that she had audaciously peddled to her public during her years as a movie star. If she were alive now, she would be, unthinkable thought, the same age as the Queen. She left behind a mystery, a tantalising sequence of events on the night of her death, which is as good a story as any Hollywood ever offered her. But above and beyond everything else, she guaranteed forever the passivity of her sexual response by imbuing it with the glamorous stillness of death. And see, that made a lot of sense to me. But at the same time, it's still got all this thing about her as a child, and whilst what I think what she models is definitely passivity, it's also that I think there's something else going on there, in that I just can't help finding her a really fantastic artist. So there's clearly brains in there. And she deconstructs this herself, Marilyn. All this stuff is not lost on her at all. There's a great quote of hers where she says, "That's the trouble. A sex symbol becomes a thing. I just hate being a thing. But if I'm going to be a symbol of something, I'd rather have it be sex than some of the other things they've got symbols of." Bit of a shame that was the choice, really, isn't it? Basically, I think we limit the discussion of her when we talk about whether she was a feminist icon or a bimbo, because the fact is, she's neither. You know, she's an artist and a person in doing the best she could with what she had at the time she was in the industry that she was dealing with. And getting that right or wrong is something you can't get that right or wrong for everybody all at the same time. You know, there's no such thing as pleasing all the people all the time, or quite often pleasing yourself all the time, I find, and I think probably Marilyn found that too. So let's look quickly at why I don't think she's a feminist icon. I've argued with friends about this a lot, because there's I think there's a sense that if you're glamorous and successful and get a degree of autonomy in your career, which is very rare when you're an actor, then you must there immediately become a feminist icon. And I just don't think that's true. I always try and come back to the touchstone when it comes to thinking about whether I can admire women and it doesn't make them feminist icons. So the touchstone for me is, does this woman make things easier for me as an oppressed person living in a patriarchy? Does this woman make this easier for me or harder? And I don't think Marilyn makes it easier to be a woman in a patriarchy. I don't think that's true at all. I think that if we're taking feminism to mean you're moving forward the liberation of girls and women, I don't think that that's something that I would need to say about Marilyn Monroe. But again, she still has this massive validity for me because she's such a great artist. And while we're talking about that, I really think it's also important to just check off the list this whole mythology about her being some kind of body positive icon either. She was not in any way large. She was a tiny, tiny woman. There's this whole mythology. The first thing you hear about her practically when you start to look into Marilyn Monroe is, her dresses were a size 16 in modern day. They weren't. I've stood alongside academics who lecture in costume and film who are very clear about the fact that she was tiny. There is one film and there is one scene in one film, one dress in one film, where in Some Like It Hot, where she's actually pregnant and she looks a bit bigger than usual, and the dress actually makes her look a bit bigger than usual. In general, she was absolutely like Hollywood conventional, small and pressured to stay that way. And I just think if we don't acknowledge that, it really gaslights women looking at her and then looking at our own bodies. It's the same as people going, "Oh, chubby, plain little Judy Garland." Who's sort of phenomenally beautiful and gorgeous and slim, even before she's really addicted to the diet pills towards the end where she's all brittle. So no, I'm not buying it. They both fitted the conventions of their day because they had to. And let's be honest, we know that's why most women don't work, even really great actresses don't get enough work in the industry now, is still because of size. So let's be honest that they were slim. Let's be sad for their struggles to stay that way. And let's try and liberate ourselves going forward from the idea that that more important than being good at your craft is that you have to be tiny to fit a certain box. Anyway, that's a whole other salon. The reason I think she's not a bimbo is because she made some really interesting decisions about her own films. So when she gets a degree of autonomy, she starts to be able to leverage for better roles, and then she becomes a part of her own production company. And two really fascinating films come out of this. And those are the two films I'd like to talk about next. So the first, when she really can pressure the studio for better roles, she picks, this is what's fascinating, I think. She doesn't like go off the rails and go, right, I shall now give everyone the Dane. You know, she basically agrees with her own typecasting, which I think actually would have been really fun to see her play against, but that's a side point. Again, another fantasy salon later down the line. But she kind of knows what her casting type is, and she just works with it. She's seen a play called Bus Stop, in which there is a part that's perfect for her, but it's just, and it is a blonde showgirl who lots of people write off as being ditzy or stupid. But she's not, and she's written really well. And Marilyn recognises this and really, 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 really works hard until the studio let her make the film of that play. And she watches that play over and over to try and get that part right. And it's one of her best roles. Bus Stop is fascinating. And it's fascinating about toxic masculinity. It totally deconstructs this idea of men like literally lassoing women and having to be these emotionally cut off, macho overachievers. And yeah, it's not perfect. It's still made in the 50s. They still get together in the end. But he has to completely change to be worthy of her character. And she does not change. And that is a really radical film for its time. And she chose that. And then she goes on with her own production company to make... Actually, like, I don't know if this is a guilty secret or just I'm just going to say it anyway. She makes my favourite of all of her films, which is The Prince and the Showgirl, which is widely kind of quite dismissed, but I absolutely love it. And she picks a script by Terence Rattigan. Like, what smarts this woman had. And it's a beautiful film, I think. It is stagey, but I really love it, and I encourage you to watch both of those two films if you haven't already. So I'm going to read a little extract now from my absolute... I feel like I searched all my life for the book that finally gave me an insight into not really just about Marilyn, but really about how we process Marilyn. And it's a book by Sarah Churchwell called The Many Lives of Marilyn Monroe. And obviously I was delighted, because we all love to be vindicated, don't we? I was delighted when I read this book and found there was a little section in it about Bus Stop and The Prince and the Showgirl, which sort of validated quite a lot of my thoughts about it. So I'm going to read you now this section of this book. I'm trying to get my notes in order for my next scene, but perhaps I won't bother doing that. Okay, so this is this. The next film she made, after winning her year-long battle with Fox, was Bus Stop, with director Joshua Logan. There's no doubt that the part of Sherry is considerably more nuanced and subtle than Monroe's previous cartoon roles. Sherry has a past and dreams and desire. An abused, tired-looking nightclub singer with a checkered past and an uncertain future. She is more knowing and mature than the naive cowboy who falls in love with her. Far and away Monroe's best performance to date, and arguably her best performance ever, Sherry is by turns wistful, bemused, sad, hopeful and angry. Sherry is not just another of Monroe's dumb blondes. There is a difference in the writing and performing of this character and her successes. Like Elsie Marina, Sugar Kane, Amanda Dell and Rosalind Tiber, the characters that Monroe will go on to play in her final 4 films, Sherry is more worldly wise, more mature than the men around her. More of a whole person, less of an unblemished character, not so real as The Girl or Lorelei Lee. Although Monroe's reputation for behavioural problems on set, lateness, not knowing her lines, demanding scores of takes and retakes, was by now preceding her, her director and co-star Don Murray both finished the film convinced of her genius. Logan said, "I finally realised I had had the chance of working with the greatest artist I'd ever worked with in my life, and it was Marilyn Monroe. I couldn't believe it." Don Murray, a successful stage actor making his film debut, clashed with Monroe several times during filming. Nonetheless, concluded that she was a far better screen actor than he. When the first preview took place, we were all stunned. We couldn't believe how good Marilyn was. This is when all of us stage people came to realise that the screen medium is a totally different animal. The critics agreed. The New York Times declaring, "Hold on to your chairs, everybody, and get set for a rattling surprise. Marilyn Monroe has finally proved herself as an actress in Bus Stop. She and the picture are swell." The film doubled its cost, earning $4.25 million in its first run. The only film that Marilyn's production company independently made was The Prince and the Showgirl, with Laurence Olivier co-starring and directing. Shot on location in London, the film was an extremely difficult experience for all concerned. Monroe's personal problems were escalating, and in Olivier she found a director with no intention of indulging her anxieties. Although a showgirl, Elsie Marina was something of a departure from the girl because she's perfectly intelligent and even wise. Not only the catalyst, she's in control of much of the film's action, outmanoeuvring the Archduke and his son, the Prince. Monroe turned in another nuanced performance in a film that wasn't up to her standard, and that astonished the co-workers who suffered through her problems in production. Oscar-winning cinematographer Jack Cardiff described the frustration of take after take during which Monroe forgot or blew her lines, and their subsequent amazement when watching the rushes. He concluded with a backhanded compliment that she wasn't an actress, she was a genius. Dame Sybil Thorndike was more generous. "She is the only one of us who really knows how to act in front of a camera." Dame Edith Evans visited the set and told Monroe afterwards, "When I saw you on set, I thought you weren't working at all. Then I saw the rushes in the projection room, and the scenes are all yours." The film itself was not a success in America, receiving mixed to bad reviews. But Monroe won the Di Donatello Award for her performance, the Italian equivalent of Hollywood's Academy Award. I do remember seeing a really lovely Parkinson interview with Dame Sybil Thorndike, where he wanted to talk about all of her life, of course, but also he asked her about how difficult had it been working with Marilyn Monroe, and she just shut that line down completely. She was such a sister, and just said, "Now, of course, you're talking about a very talented and intelligent young woman. It was an honour. It was an honour. I learned more working with her than I learned from anyone else during my years in television and film. She did a really, really fantastic job." And he's just like, so it's really nice. And I think that is what I really want to say about her films, I suppose, is that those decisions that she makes are smart, integral decisions where she turns in really, really good work. And that brings me to another quote of hers where she says, "It's nice to be included in other people's fantasies, but you also like to be accepted for your own sake." And I feel like her films really show that. And I suppose the last thing I want to say about her, before I hand over to my special guest star, who's our first chap to do a little turn for me, is I'm going to just finish off my evidence presented to you that she was not a bimbo by reading you one of her poems. She left quite a lot of fragments of writing, and this is one of her unpublished poems called Life. "I am of both your directions, existing more with the cold frost, strong as a cobweb in the wind, hanging downward the most. Somehow remaining, those beaded rays have the colours I've seen in paintings. Oh, life, they have cheated you. Thinner than a cobweb's thread, sheerer than any, but it did attach itself and held fast in strong winds, and singed by leaping hot fires, life, of which at singular times I am of both your directions. Somehow I remain hanging downward the most, as both of your directions pull me. I don't wanna be funny anymore. I don't wanna be funny anymore. Lately I've been feeling like the odd man out. I heard my friends saying things I don't mean out loud. I don't wanna be funny anymore. I got a too short skirt, maybe I can be the cute one. Is there room in the band? I don't need to be the front man. And if not, I'll be the biggest fan. I don't want the joke to be on me. Yeah, I'll buy the clothes and I'll be the best dressed. Yeah, I'll read the books and I'll be the smartest. I'll play guitar and I'll be the artist. Try not to laugh, I know it'll be hard. I'm serious. I know it's a first, but I don't want to be funny anymore. I'll be the gossip, hear it through the grapevine. Pass it on, she's done with the old times. That funny girl doesn't want to smile for a while. Truman Capote, who was really good friends with her, based Breakfast at Tiffany's on her and had her in mind for the casting originally. So I'm going to ask you to welcome now my lovely, lovely special guest, TJ Holmes, who's been arranging a lot of the music for these salons and now is going to do us a reading from Truman Capote's Breakfast at Tiffany's.
The sky was red Friday night. It thundered, and Saturday, departing day, the city swayed in a squall-like downpour. Sharks might have swum through the air, though it seemed improbable a plane could penetrate it. But Holly, ignoring my cheerful conviction that her flight would not go, continued her preparations, placing, I must say, the chief burden of them on me, for she had decided it would be unwise of her to come near the brownstone. Quite rightly, too. It was under surveillance, whether by police or reporters, one could not tell. Simply a man, sometimes men, who hung around the stoop. So she'd gone from the hospital to a bank and straight then to Joe Bell's bar. She don't figure she was followed, Joe Bell told me when he came with a message that Holly wanted me to meet her there as soon as possible, a half hour at most, bringing her jewelry, her guitar, toothbrushes and stuff, and a bottle of 100-year-old brandy. She says you'll find it hid down in the bottom of the dirty clothes basket. Yeah, oh, and the cat. She wants the cat. But hell, he said, I don't think we should help her at all. She ought to be protected against herself. Me, I feel like telling the cops. Maybe if I go back and build her some drinks, maybe I can get her drunk enough to call it off. Stumbling, skidding up and down the fire escape between Holly's apartment and mine, wind-blown and winded and wet to the bone, clawed to the bone as well, for the cat had not looked favourably upon evacuation, especially in such inclement weather. I managed a fast, first-rate job of assembling her going-away belongings. I even found the St. Christopher's medal. Everything was piled on the floor of my room, a poignant pyramid of brassieres and dancing slippers and pretty things I packed in Holly's only suitcase. There was a mass left over that I had to put in paper grocery bags. I couldn't think how to carry the cat until I thought of stuffing him in a pillowcase. Never mind why, but once I walked from New Orleans to Nancy's Landing, Mississippi, just under 500 miles. It was a light-hearted lark compared to the journey to Joe Bell's bar. The guitar filled with rain softened the paper sacks, the sacks split and perfume spilled on the pavement, pearls rolled in the gutter while the wind pushed and the cat scratched, the cat screamed, but worse, I was frightened, a coward to equal Jose. Those storming streets seemed to swarm with unseen presences waiting to trap, imprison me for aiding an outlaw. The outlaw said, "You're late, Buster. Did you bring the brandy?" And the cat, released, leaped and perched on her shoulder. His tail swung like a baton, conducting rhapsodic music. Holly, too, seemed inhabited by melody, some bouncy bon voyage papa. Uncorking the brandy, she said, "This was meant to be part of my hope chest. The idea was, every anniversary we'd have a swig. Thank Jesus I never bought the chest. Mr. Bell, sir, 3 glasses. You'll only need 2, he told her. I won't drink to your foolishness. The more she cajoled him, Mr. Bell, the lady doesn't vanish every day. Won't you toast her? The gruffer he was. I have no part of it. If you're going to hell, you'll go on your own, with no further help from me. An inaccurate statement, because seconds after he made it, a chauffeured limousine drew up outside the bar, and Holly, the first to notice it, put down her brandy, arched her eyebrows as though she expected to see the district attorney himself alight. So did I. And when I saw Joe Bell blush, I had to think, by God, he did call the police. But then, with burning ears, he announced, "It's nothing. One of them Kerry Cadillacs. I hired it to take you to the airport." He turned his back on us to fiddle with one of his flower arrangements. Holly said, "Kind, dear Mr. Bell, look at me, sir." He wouldn't. He wrenched the flowers from the vase and thrust them at her. They missed their mark, scattered on the floor. "Goodbye," he said, and as though he were going to vomit, scurried to the men's room. We heard the door lock. The Kerry chauffeur was a worldly specimen who accepted our slapdash luggage most civilly and remained rock-faced when, as the limousine swished uptown through a lessening rain, Holly stripped off her clothes, the riding costume she'd never had the chance to substitute, and struggled into a slim black dress. We didn't talk. Talk could have only led to argument. And also Holly seemed too preoccupied for conversation. She hummed to herself, swigged brandy, and leaned constantly forward to peer out the windows as if she were hunting an address, or, I decided, taking a last impression of a scene she wanted to remember. It was neither of these, but this. "Stop here," she ordered the driver. We pulled to the curb of a street in Spanish Harlem, a savage, a garish, a moody neighborhood garlanded with poster portraits of movie stars and Madonnas. Sidewalk litterings of fruit rind and rotted newspaper were hurled about by the wind, for the wind still boomed, though the rain had hushed and there were bursts of blue in the sky. Holly stepped out of the car. She took the cat with her. Cradling him, she scratched his head and asked, "What do you think? This ought to be the right kind of place for a tough guy like you. Garbage cans, rats galore, plenty of cat bums to hang around with. So scram," she said, dropping him, and when he did not move away, instead raised his thug face and questioned her with yellowish pirate eyes, she stamped her foot. "I said, beat it!" He rubbed against her leg. "I said, fuck off!" she shouted, then jumped back in the car, slammed the door, and, "Go," she told the driver. "Go, go." I was stunned. Well, you are a bitch. We travelled a block before she replied. I told you. We just met by the river one day, that's all. Independents, both of us. We never made each other any promises. We never, she said, and her voice collapsed. A tick. An invalid whiteness seized her face. The car had paused for a traffic light. Then she had the door open and she was running down the street, and I ran after her. But the cat was not at the corner where he'd been left. There was no one, nothing on the street, except a urinating drunk and 2 Negro nuns herding a file of sweet-singing children. Other children emerged from doorways, and ladies leaned over their windowsills to watch as Holly darted up and down the block, ran back and forth, chanting, "You, cat, where are you? Here, cat." The limousine had followed us. Now Holly let me steer her toward it. At the door she hesitated, she looked past me, and she shuddered. She had to grip my arm to stand up. Oh, Jesus God, we did belong to each other. He was mine. Then I made her a promise. I said I'd come back and find her cat. I'll take care of him too. I promise. She smiled, that cheerless new pinch of a smile. But what about me? She said, whispered and shivered again. I'm very scared, Buster. Yes, at last, because it could go on forever. Not knowing what's yours until you've thrown it away. My mouth's so dry, if my life depended on it, I couldn't spit. She stepped in the car, sank in the seat. Sorry, driver. Let's go. Drug case actress believed gangland victim. In due time, however, the press reported, fleeing playgirl traced to Rio. Apparently no attempt was made by American authorities to recover her, and soon the matter diminished to an occasional gossip column mention. Months went by, a winter of them, and not a word from Holly. The owner of the brownstone sold her abandoned possessions, the white satin bed, the tapestry, a precious Gothic chair. A new tenant acquired the apartment. His name was Quentin Smith, and he entertained as many gentlemen callers of a noisy nature as Holly ever had, though in this instance Madame Spaniella did not object. Indeed, she doted on the young man, and supplied filet mignon whenever he had a black eye. But in the spring, a postcard came. It was scribbled in pencil and signed with a lipstick kiss. Brazil was beastly, but Buenos Aires the best. Not Tiffany's, but almost. I'm joined at the hip with divine Senor. Love? Think so. Anywho, I'm looking for somewhere to live. Senor has wife, 7 brats. I will let you know address when I know it myself. Mille tendresse. But the address, if it ever existed, never was sent, which made me sad. There was so much I'd wanted to write her. That I'd sold 2 stories, had read where the trawlers were countersuing for divorce, was moving out of the brownstone because it was haunted. But mostly I wanted to tell her about her cat. I'd kept my promise. I found him. It took 2 weeks of after-work roaming through those Spanish Harlem streets, and there were many false alarms, flashes of tiger-striped fur that upon inspection were not him. But one day, one cold, sunshiny Sunday winter afternoon, it was, flanked by potted plants and framed by clean lace curtains. He was seated in the window of a warm-looking room. I wondered what his name was, for I was certain he had one now, certain he'd arrived somewhere he belonged. African hut or whatever. I hope Holly has too.
Thank you so much, TJ. Cheers to you. Push hearts to TJ Holmes, wasn't that? something. So, if you are feeling like you just want to get wallowing around in some more Marilyn now, we've come practically to the end of the salon. I'm so grateful to TJ for doing that, and I'm so grateful for DJ Stegosaurus, because you have a playlist you can go listen to if you're in the mood. It's a lovely exploration of kind of all the thing we've talked about, really, the highs, the lows, like Starks, things she did herself, things that we feel were inspired by her, or things that just made us vibe on her. DJ Stegosaurus done a lovely job with that playlist, so please go and check that out on Spotify. Our Marilyn Monroe playlist that goes with this salon. And I'm so glad that you've watched. Again, push hearts to you and to MM. And I'm going to finish now with a song that, I don't know, just feels like where I land whenever I end up thinking about, every time I end up thinking about Marilyn and me and everyone. I'm so tired of playing with this bow and arrow. Gonna give my heart away, leave it to the other girls to play. For I've been a temptress too long. Give me a reason to love you. Give me a reason to be a woman. I just want to be a woman. From this time unchained, we're all looking at a different picture through this new frame of mind. 1,000 flowers could bloom, so move over and give us some room, yeah, and give me a reason to love you. Give me a reason to be a woman. I just want to be a woman. So don't you stop being a man. Just take a little look from outside when you can. Show a little tenderness. It don't matter if you cry. This is the beginning of forever and ever. It's time to move on. I'm so tired of playing with this bow and arrow. Gonna give my heart away, leave it to the other girls to play. For I've been a temptress too long. Give me a reason to love you. Give me a reason to be